Hello everyone, it's Allison. Welcome to my YouTube channel and welcome to Christmas in July. Who else is excited for Christmas in July? I know I am, and so is Spellbinders. We are going to kick the month off with the monthly clubs, and specifically I am going to be playing with the small die of the month and the large die of the month. And I'm going kind of vintage style, similar to what I did last July with the clubs. And I'll link to that video at the end of this one. So here's the first card. This is using the small die of the month, which is called Skating into the Holidays. So you'll see there's a bunch of foliage and all the parts to make the cute ice skate. And there it is. Now I made mine from glossy cardstock. And we're going to be talking quite a bit about cardstock in this video because I pulled out a bunch of fun specialty cardstock to use. So here's the first cardstock. This is the Color Blend Pastel cardstock from Simon Says Stamp, and this is the glossy cardstock. Actually, that one in my right hand right there is the piece I used for the ice skates. And Simon has various color assortments of this paper, and I really love it. So let's get started on the ice skate. Now for this top piece that the laces go on, I am going to double that up. I just have a plain light blue piece of cardstock that I cut that piece from, and I will layer the glossy piece on top. And that glossy cardstock from Simon is kind of it blends from dark to light, kind of ombre. So this back piece is a little bit darker than the front piece. Now this is where I get a little finicky with my details. This bottom piece, when you put this bottom piece on the skate, that light blue part that shows underneath should be like the back of the heel, right? It should be like where there's a shadow from the heel. But it's blue because that's what the base of the skate is from. And Spellbinders doesn't need to be including a bazillion pieces in their die set, and there's nothing wrong with it. But you know me, I'm a little finicky, so I used that die to cut a scrap of brown paper, and I'm just going to trim it down. I'm just trying to get that part that I need to create the shadow effect that I want. Do you need to do this? Absolutely not. Nobody would have ever noticed that light blue part and been like, that's not right. That should be darker. But this is part of the fun for me when I create with these things. Sometimes I like to make them my own. I like to look at the little details. So that's why I did this. All right, so now we can put the rest of the skate together as intended. And really the skate goes together so easily as long as you're not me and do weird things like this. So now this top part goes on, and you can see how this top part is a little bit lighter than that base. And I like that because then the base has kind of a shadow effect because it's darker. Now for the blade, I used some silver mirrored cardstock, which I need to buy more of because I'm down to just a tiny scrap in my stash. And these little laces are adorable. And they really look like real laces when they go on. So instead of white cardstock on my cards today, I am using an off-white cardstock. This one is from MFT. I'm going to have to see if they still carry this cardstock. It might be called Primitive White. So I'll have to check that. And if they still carry it, I will link it in the supply list below. So here's this cute little bow. And then there's this teeny tiny little piece that goes in the middle of the bow right there. And that just makes it look like it's tied. It just gives a little bit of dimension to the middle part of that bow. All right, here is the Sparkling Snow 3D embossing folder. And you can see I've already embossed a piece of craft cardstock. This measures 3.5 inches by 8.5 inches because I am making slimline cards today. Now I am going to, this is my Tim Holtz brayer, and I have some white pigment ink, and I am just going to kind of highlight these snowflakes. And you'll see I have one of my small waffle flower grip mats holding my ink pad in place. And my ink pad is pretty dry. So it would have been a lot faster had I grabbed a different ink pad. And by the way, I'm using this cellophane bag from the post office to protect my craft mat. And the reason I have that, did you know the cost of stamps is going up again in about a week? So I went to the post office and grabbed a bunch of first class stamps. Now you'll see I wasn't being very careful in applying that ink with my brayer. Some of it did get on the flat parts of the panel, which is okay. I'm just using my finger to smudge that in. I'm not bothered by it. This is a snowy, imperfect background because, again, my card it's going to be vintage looking, so it's okay. Distress spritz. Yay. This is the walnut stain and weathered wood. I started playing with this in my last video? So I will find every opportunity to play with this. So you just need to shake it up. It has like a ball in the bottle. And I'm just spraying a little bit on there. Now I did get some big droplets, which again doesn't really bother me. I am spraying it onto my plastic bin first just to make sure, because these are new. I'm just making sure they spray okay. And I'm trying to catch the light so you can see some of this shimmer. It's hard to see on camera, but it is amazing in person. Now my panel, it's slightly warped, not terribly. I think this was 80-pound cardstock. So I'm just adding a thick piece of cardstock to the back with score tape to give it a bit more structure. And I would be adding this to the back of my panel anyway because I like that it gives me a little bit of lift off of the card base. And so here I'm gluing it onto the card base. That's the same off-white paper. It just, I don't know, it gives the card a more substantial feel. All right, look at this cardstock. Biocycle chlorophyll cardstock. It's created from grass cut from upper Bavarian meadows. This is from your Paper Insider. Wow. And this is Latte cardstock from Spellbinders. I had been searching for the perfect light brown cardstock forever, and I finally bought this in the past few months, and it's awesome. If you're looking for light brown cardstock, this is the one. All right, my sentiment, the Warm Wishes, is from the Create a Christmas Sentiment set. And now I have these thin ivory colored ribbons that I'm going to hang my skates from. And here you can see that I use that fun green paper for my poinsettia. Paper made from the Bavarian meadows. I want to be in the Bavarian meadows right now. All right, I am using my waffle flower. I think this is the Shader 2 Plus brush. This just lets me get little details on here. And I'm using my Forest Moss and Vintage Photo Distress inks just to add a little bit of shading to some of the foliage, especially the flower. I want the bottom layer of my flower to be a little bit darker. And you'll see I keep all of my waffle flower brushes in my craft stacks container from Spellbinders, which has been really useful. All right, so here is Twisted Citron Distress Spritz, and you can see the boo-boo on my finger. I tried to open this bottle because it's wrapped in plastic, and yeah, I stabbed myself with the scissors. So be careful when you're opening these bottles. Ranger, I love all of your sprays, but man, the plastic on there it's like Fort Knox. All right, off camera, I have added a bit of aging or scuff marks to my skates because, again, I want this to be vintage. I want it to look aged. So I'll show you how I did that. Here's some of that glossy paper, and here's a Vintage Photo Distress crayon. And because this is glossy paper, you can just smudge that crayon in. And that's what I did on the skates. So that was fun. I'm going to be trying to use my distress crayons more in the next month or two. I really need to start playing with them. So here are those ribbons. And I just temporarily had some foliage up top just to figure out where I wanted those ribbons to meet. And I'm also going to attach it with some score tape at the bottom so I can then glue on my skate. And then once I have the skate down, I can go ahead and glue on that sentiment. And those sentiments are, I think I stacked 3 pieces together. Here I'm trying to show you the shine from that Distress Spritz. The piece on the right doesn't have it, so I was trying to put it there for comparison purposes, but you know, it's just so hard to appreciate on camera. And here I sprayed that same Twisted Citron on the white leaf. Here are some foam squares. I have thin foam squares, and these are thicker than my thin foam squares. So it's a good for popping this one up because it has to overlap the bottom skate a little bit. And I also put some little pieces of foam tape on that blade just so that part of the skate is supported as well. And this is where I'm just trying to finalize placement of where I want the poinsettia so that I can attach the string for the skates. So again, I'm taking a piece of score tape, and now I can pop up my flower with some foam tape, and that will allow me to tuck all the rest of the foliage underneath. So I'll just pull that release tape off of the score tape that I had used before putting my foam tape on top. And here I'm just starting to play around with the arrangement, and you know me, who knows how long this took me because I fiddle around with floral arrangements a lot until I'm happy with them. So honestly, it is probably the longest part of the card right here. All right, for an embellishment, I just took one of my Pink Fresh Studio glitter drops. This is the Sparkle and Shine Ombre one, and it's kind of gold and silver, but when you put it with this green color, it kind of pulls in that green color. And there we go. There is the card. All right, we're going to make the card with the large die of the month, which is called Snow-Capped Holidays. And there's a branch and some foliage, pine cones, and then some birds, and of course the birdhouse. So we are going to start with the simple assembly of the birdhouse. I have 2 shades of brown, a darker brown for the shadow parts, and this off-white paper that I used for the roof of the house. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see what this paper looks like. But this is some of my other specialty paper. I chose to keep my house pretty simple because, again, my cards today, they really have 3 colors. It's basically beiges, a little bit of green, and a little bit of blue. Now here's this paper. This is Woodgrain paper. And I'm just very lightly going over it with this cheap little brush that I use when I don't want too much ink on something. This is a very rough, spongy brush. If I used one of my soft blending brushes, it would just color the paper. And this, if I just hit it a little bit, it's just accentuating the wood grain. And I also kind of want to scuff it up and make it look aged. Now I have my card base, which I prepared the same exact way as my first card base. The only difference is I left a bigger margin on this base. It's 4 by 9, whereas my other card base was 3 3/4 by 8 3/4. Now the roof of the birdhouse will hang over the edges a little bit, but that's okay. I can always make my own envelope, or there are plenty of people that I hand deliver cards to each year. And I like the look of it hanging over. Now this die from the set it's a ribbon. It's meant to hang the birdhouse from a branch, but it's not going to be long enough for me since I'm making a slimline card. So what to do? Well, I want to use that ribbon again that I used on my first card. So I'm just using this die just to get an idea of where I want to attach that ribbon, and I'm using a pencil. And now I'm going to take my craft knife, and I'm just going to make small slits in this roof. And I had tried to zoom in before on the roof so you could see that wood grain pattern, but here I am trying to get that ribbon through those tiny little slits, and I finally was able to do that. And the second one was a little bit easier than the first. I will take some score tape and attach that on the back because I finally got it all the way through. I don't want it to come back out. So this one went in a little bit easier. And again, I'll tape that to the back. This ribbon is so old. I mean, we're talking, I think I used it in sewing class in middle school. All right, this is Sky Remake Cardstock. This is also from your Paper Insider, I think box number 4. And this is made from the discarded residue in the leather manufacturing process. I'm always fascinated by the paper in their boxes because there's always an interesting story behind them. I cut the main part of the birds out of that blue paper. And by the way, those dies at the top, those foliage dies, I forgot to show those at the beginning. That's part of the die set as well. Now these birds are designed to be cardinals, I believe. So there's this part that goes on the head. I'm not going to include those on my birds. And then there are all sorts of wings and tails to attach. But again, I'm going to make these little guys my own. So I think like this one has a tail and he's got 2 wings. And I think this was the idea for this particular bird, but he just looks like he's in a hurry to get somewhere. And I want my bird to be chill and hanging out on the house. All right, I've already started playing around with the grouping of foliage at the top so that I know where my birdhouse needs to attach. And off camera, I've already added some of that Twisted Citron Distress Spritz to a few of my leaves. And now I'm ready to attach the birdhouse. You'll see that I had already added some foam tape to pop it up. And now I'm just going to remove that cluster at the top so that I can secure these ribbons to the card base. And again, I will be using my score tape to get those down. And now I'm adding foam tape to the pine cones to secure those down. And I can tuck all the foliage underneath, just like I did with the poinsettia on the first card. So obviously I'm making both of these cards very similar. I'm kind of casing my own work. By the way, you'll see some flowers that I'll add to the bunch, which I made with that blue paper. I'll probably hoard the rest of that piece of paper because I love it. And of course it's my color, turquoise. So here I'm just playing around, cutting, snipping things so that they'll fit underneath. And now I can finish some of the details of the house, starting with this little thing that the bird is going to perch on. And then here is the sentiment I'm using. This is from the Comfort and Joy Sentiments set. This is a hot foil set. I used pewter hot foil, which is just a little bit more aged looking than silver. And I'm going to put some thin foam squares on the back of this sentiment. And I'm going to pop it up on the roof. And then this is also going to give my other bird somewhere to perch. So the sentiment is on thin foam squares, and now I have my bird on regular foam tape. So he's going to be a little bit higher than the sentiment, perfect to be able to perch. And it might be hard to tell. I did add a little bit of aging to these birds as well with some distress, vintage photo distress ink. And this little bird is popped up on thin foam squares. He doesn't need to be perched quite as high. All right, I've sprayed some of the weathered wood distress spritz in my plastic bin because I decided last minute that I wanted to give a little tiny bit of sparkle to some of these blue elements. So I'm just taking my fingers and adding just a little bit. It's just giving me a little bit of control over how much I put on. And now I'm just putting a little bit on the birds. And, you know, by the way, this doesn't stain your hands. It's easy to just clean it off with water. Now, one thing I didn't do that I thought about afterwards was to kind of ink blend the edge of these card panels with some vintage photo distress ink just to give the whole thing a little bit more vintagey aged look, but I forgot. But here's the final step, just gluing down the rest of the foliage. And I love the colors. I think these are really sweet. Again, the inspiration for the colors came from last year when I did my small and large die of the month cards with browns and blues. And here's a little close-up of the bird. He looks very happy. And there are both cards together. So very similar look, different products, but I love them both. I think I love the skates. The skates are really cute. And like I said, they're so easy to put together. All right, that is it for me today. I know this was a longer video, but you know, 2 clubs, I got to squish them into one video, especially because the cards are so similar today. I really hope you enjoyed watching these cards come together. Leave me a comment and let me know which one you liked the best. If you did enjoy this video, please give me a thumbs up. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe. I appreciate having you here as always, and I will see you next time. Bye-bye.